The first symptom I encountered was that the power steering pump really howls on a cold startup. We've got a temperature, what the heck? We've got a temperature of 20 degrees Fahrenheit, -7°C. Let's see how it sounds on startup. You can see the howling starts and then it subsides after about 10 seconds or so. The second problem I encountered was after warming up the car one morning in a rather spirited run, I lost my power steering boost. And I think what happened was that this hose collapsed. This hose leads from the power steering reservoir down to the power steering pump. And in the bottom of the power steering reservoir is a screen, and I believe there's a buildup of sludge and whatnot on the screen. After I stopped the car and stopped the engine, and after it relaxed a little bit, I think the hose opened up again, and then I had power steering boost again, but it was rather disconcerting. Well, we finally got some nice weather, so I'm going to tackle this project. First of all, here's the fluid reservoir, and here's how it works. The fluid comes up through the smaller diameter hose here and fills the reservoir. Then there's a screen in the middle of the reservoir, and at the bottom of the reservoir is this hose which sucks the fluid out down to the power steering pump. I'm going to hook up a couple of hoses to some bottles so I can flow good fluid into the system and collect the dirty fluid. That's part one. And then part two is cleaning the screen in the reservoir. So here we go. Okay, here's the setup. I've got the car up on jack stands so that I can turn the wheels left and right, lock to make sure I purge all the old power steering fluid out of the power steering rack. And then I took the pressure line here, and you can see it's got some old brown fluid already rising in it, and it goes into this container which is empty. I've got the vacuum line from the power steering pump hooked up to this piece of tubing, which I've pre-filled with power steering fluid, and it's hooked up to that jug, which I've put 3 quarts of fresh power steering fluid in. Now I'm going to get in, start the car, and turn the rack side to side, and keep an eye on the level in the bottles, and hopefully the old fluid will fill the bottle that's on the left, and the bottle that's on the right, the fresh fluid from that will vacuum into the power steering system, and hopefully cleanly. Remembering that power steering fluid is a flammable oil, and we have it over top of the catalytic converter, the engine, so I've secured the bottles as well as I can. Make sure they won't tip or fall over. Very, very critical in this, because you wouldn't want to get that oil all over the place. I also secured the hoses at the top with some tape so that they wouldn't come jetting out. Especially the pressure line. I was worried that the pressure line could come jetting out of that bottle and make a heck of a mess. So next thing is to change the fluid. Okay, we'll start her up and see how it goes. Well, that looks good. The new fluid's going down, and dirty fluid's coming up, just as I had hoped. And I'm able to turn the steering wheel lock to lock a number of times. You can see the the pressure hose is kicking around a little bit, and we're drawing some air, so I'm going to call that it. Okay, see what we get. Okay, it looks promising. I can see fresh fluid in the return line. I did draw some air in the fill line, which I did not want to. The dirty jug's pretty full, but you can see some cleaner fluid up top. The clean jug's pretty empty. So that looked pretty good. Now we'll button this up and get on to part 2, which is cleaning out the reservoir. Okay, I took the reservoir off and swished around some solvent in it and let the solvent pull what gunk it could out, and you can see some gunk in the pan there, but I wasn't convinced that I got everything. So I took the reservoir apart, which involved bending a bunch of tabs, and there's a gasket that goes under this lid. That's the top side of the lid. It's the bottom side. The gasket was in there. And then here's the reservoir. And then the screen is in the bottom of the reservoir. It's pretty gunked up. You can see a diverter there. There's the bib where the power steering fluid goes in. There's a little diverter, and then there's a screen that you can see that's pretty gunked up. I understand the screens are pretty delicate, so I'm going to use some solvent and a gentle brush and try and clean it as best as I can. And then I'm going to dry it. You got to make sure you get all the solvent off, because the power steering fluid seals will not like the solvent at all. And of course, beneath that screen is the outlet, and you can see that here. The outlet tube, this big one, where the power steering fluid goes back to the power steering pump to be circulated. So I'm going to get on cleaning that screen now. Okay. I used some solvent and a new paintbrush, soft bristles, and got in there and cleaned the screen out. Now you can really see the screen. It's not all gunked up, and you can see the amount of gunk that came out of there. It is a fine, very, very fine mesh brass screen. It wouldn't take much poking to poke a hole in that, so you'd be very gentle with it. I'm going to take this piece and set it in front of some hot air for about a half an hour, and flash all the solvent off of this so it's good and dry before I reassemble it and then reinstall it. Okay, I got it back together again. Filled it up with power steering fluid and ran it for just a little bit. Got a little funky whine, and there's bubbles in the power steering fluid. But I think this is probably normal. We got some air in the system in the process. So we're just going to let the bubbles subside and top it up again, run it a little bit, and basically run it until it gets the air, works the air out, and it should be good.